Welcome to the Mythic Life Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Brumett, and joining me today is a good friend of mine, Shawn Berry. I've known Shawn for the last, I'd say, year and a half since I moved up to the area of New Paltz. We both have kids that went to school together, and I got to know Shawn that we have had some crossover history of like places that we lived. And we are going to have some fun today exploring the concept of economic structures and partnerships and the sense of community, and see where we can really enlighten what is happening in this current stage of life. So thank you for joining me today, Shawn. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here.
Shawn is an organizational strategist inspired to harness the power of business to create resilient local economies as patterns to be documented, open source, scaled globally, and adapted regionally. Shawn left an early career path in nuclear physics research to found the Wood Shanty Cooperative, a custom cabinet and furniture shop in San Francisco to set the standard for ethical craftsmanship in the green building movement. This hands-on experience as an entrepreneur combined with community organizing and systems theory to craft the vision for Lift Economy to model an economy that works for all life. Wow. Nuclear physics research.
Oh yeah, that was
Oh
fun.
my gosh. I feel like there's so much of your past. We've really only connected over the fact that you lived in San Francisco. You're up in Grass Valley, doing some of more your spiritual work, and like
That's right.
But there's this huge span of who Shawn is that I really don't even know. Share with me, like, where did you grow up? Where was kind of your beginning? I want to hear your story.
Sure, thanks. Let's see. Well, today we're in the Hudson Valley of New York, but I actually grew up in Western New York, which is like closer to Ohio than New York City. But yeah, born and raised in Rochester, up on the Great Lake Ontario, and yeah, I lived there, my whole childhood, and then I went to college there. Basically, I went to Geneseo, the SUNY state school there.
I was just kind of to go into nuclear physics.
Yeah, the nuclear physics. So I was just kind of like doing the next thing, right? It's like you're a kid, they put you in school, wound up playing a bunch of sports. I got recruited to play soccer at Geneseo. Geneseo still is it's actually really hard to get into. You have to have like really high grades and everything, and I wasn't like that. So I got in as a student athlete. And then when I got in there, they said, well, what are you going to study? And I was like, I don't know. I'm going to play sports. And they said, well, what did you like in high school? And I actually had my senior year, I had a great physics teacher that did amazing, like, demonstrations in the class, and so I was like, well, that was the coolest class, so physics, sure. And they're like, oh, okay, no problem. And then they put me into the the physics track for physics majors, which I was just kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever, and I wound up not failing out. I don't know if you know about like the hard sciences in college. They, if you get like a 30% on a test, maybe that's a B or something. This is like this. There's this academic rigor, which again, I wasn't a really diligent student, but I guess I could understand the concepts of the relationship between things, and the mathematics is the language. So I wound up passing, these classes that everybody else was failing out of, and so I was like, yeah, maybe I'll just kind of stick around. I wasn't committed to it or anything, but I had this kind of naive notion of like, well, if this is like the hardest degree to get here, then then I'll get the best job, right? Again, super naive notion, but there was something like that in my mind of like, oh, okay, sure, I'll just do the hard thing. And then that school actually and I think believe to this day has one of the largest undergraduate physics programs in the country, and interestingly enough, no graduate program.
Wow.
So as an
Interesting.
undergraduate, I got to teach astronomy. We actually had a nuclear or a particle accelerator, so I actually got to run the particle accelerator and do experiments. And
Oh, cool.
then through the connections and the funding for all that stuff, I was kind of funneled into a National Science Foundation research grant at the University of Rochester. So I would work summers and vacations there. And at that time, it was the largest laser in the world. It has since been replaced in Lawrence Livermore Laboratories in California. Now
Mm.
has the largest laser. And they're actually making some advances on that project. But when I was doing it, it was interesting. It was billions and billions of dollars going into this. So,
Yeah.
it was quite the, kind of advanced facility. And so it was kind of cool to see and participate. But when I graduated from school, they offered me a job there, and I was a little more curious, and I was having a more of an expansive moment of thinking about what
Mhm.
is the purpose of life, and what is all this school and career stuff, and I was kind of thinking beyond some of these things. And then so I got curious about, like, well, what exactly the research you're doing here. They had told us it was for fusion as an alternative energy source, which is what happens in the sun, of course, which is great
Yeah.
there, but it's definitely harder to recreate here on Earth. And so when I was getting, a little more curious about that, one of the folks I worked with kind of let me know the secret that it's really bomb research. And that was kind of like the beginning of I guess the unraveling of believing what I was told.
Yeah.
Because I was really I was shocked and offended of, like, hey, bombs, war, killing people, ethically immoral. Yet I thought I was doing the right thing by going to school and getting the degree and getting the good
Yeah.
job at the the competitive laboratory and all that stuff. So it was really this moment of, like, wait a minute, what is really going on here? Didn't accept that. I moved to San Francisco, wound up starting a woodworking company. So it really kind of, that was a decision point that sent me on this different path.
Wow,
Um,
that's a big pivot, um, to go into that sense of craftsmanship and like get into something so organic versus this huge concept of, you know, nuclear fusion and that path. And it's amazing because this really is something really dear to my heart and to the work that I do, of like how we grow up and we're kind of prescribed life, and we're like, oh, okay, so this is the template and we're going to fill our template with our personality. And then all of a sudden we realize, wait a second, we don't have to fill this template. Like, we don't have to fit into a box. And so you go out to San Francisco and you get into this craftsmanship. Um, what was unique about this company that you were a part of? What happened there that really kind of helped you step into the sense of like co-op community and take that direction?
Yeah, so I guess the kind of the bridge to that was, so while I did study physics, I also studied studio art. And my father is a painter and an artist. And so I had a lot of kind of just like hands-on experience.
Yeah.
Not necessarily directly connected, but my one of my grandfathers was a farmer and ran a big farm, so I would work on the farm. So I had this, kind of embodied sense of using my body, creatively and productively. That again didn't necessarily translate to the, computers and science and just numbers and data. It was kind of missing that piece for me. Um,
Mhm.
so I had this idea of, like, kind of this disillusionment with, like, basically corporate capitalism career orientation. Was like, well, if these are the options, like, I'm going to do something creative. Um, and do something beautiful with my hands. And so, but I also saw my father, and also I had an aunt who was she made art her profession, and I saw them really struggle with, like, how do you sell art and make a living and all that kind of stuff. So I
Yeah.
was trying to think through of, like, and I had done a lot of photography, and I knew that was really competitive to get into. So I was kind of like scratching my head of, like, how can I do something creative and make a living? And there was a little furniture shop in my neighborhood that was hiring woodworkers. I saw a little sign, and I was just like, kind of, light bulb moment, and just went in there and was like, hey, you got to hire me.
Mm.
And convinced the guy to hire me, and started working there. And then very shortly after I started working there, the guy who started it wanted to get out of the the workshop. He was losing money. He didn't know how to run it. He wasn't even there. He was running a retail store. So me and what turned out to be my co-founder, we took over the lease, bought the tools, bought a bunch of wood, started making furniture. So it was kind of like this really serendipitous, like, no
Yeah.
business plan, no capital, no really plan about it, but just like, yeah, I'm not going to do a normal thing. Let's do something ourselves. Let's do something with our hands, something creative. And then I also, again, with the naive notions, we kind of had this idea of, like, yeah, we'll go surfing in the morning and hang out, whatever, and then we'll make a little bit of furniture. It's all going to be great, right? And it was great in terms of, it was a lot of fun. We ran a workshop with ourselves and a bunch of friends that would come in and make different projects. And
Mm.
so it really, and you touched on this concepts of, like, community and engagement. So yeah, so instead of, like, going to a cubicle somewhere, or a laboratory, or some kind of pigeonholed economic activity that I would get paid for, it was like very wide open, creative. It was our own workshop. We set up the space, we got to decide what we were going to make. We invited friends and people to come in and build furniture with us, work on projects. So yeah, it was very fulfilling in that sense of, what do I want to do today?
Yeah.
And
Um, with that, like, I hear it, you kind of went through this additional cycle of, like, this idea, this template of business, right? And, like, coming into this space, and the person who was running it was like, I'm not making money, I'm out, and taking it over. Like, it's so interesting because we don't want to recreate the wheel in starting over, and yet this template of what the design of a company is, and, like, what we're supposed to do and what the agendas are around money and business. um it has certain truths to it, and at the same time it has so many constraints in its concept. And this is where I want to really explore with you, of, like, how that inspired Lyft economy, and, like, what exactly is this concept of Lyft economy. um, you know, the concept of mythic life. A mythic life is free from the constraints of old stereotypes, led by the adventurous soul that is striving for joy, fulfillment of purpose, and the quest for higher growth and connection. A person who believes there is more than meets the eye, that pursues personal development, alternative medicine, lifestyles that are wanting to break free from the societal norms and explore their mystical abilities. There's greatness within everyone, and a soul desiring for joy. And with this idea of, like, breaking free of these stereotypes, like, what is the stereotypical business design that Lyft economy kind of speaks to and wants to, like, hit that reset button? Like, tell us, what is Lyft economy?
sure. And maybe I'll just, again, kind of bridge it from my story so far of, so I had this, wood shop, kind of making
Yeah.
furniture with friends, this very kind of engaged and pretty open lifestyle, right? Like, I set my own
Yeah.
time, I worked as much as I wanted, etc. And very little awareness of business, no planning, no budget. And, I remember it was like a rude awakening, maybe a few years in, when I realized I needed to do taxes and, was like actually summarizing my income and expenses, and realized I think I made like $2,000 one year or something. Right. So I was actually, I wasn't making money. I was losing money. I was in debt and, not running a profitable business. But again, my mind was on such other things that it wasn't even a concern. So it took a long time to get that awareness and get the skill sets, and also get the clientele and the customers. So eventually that little wood shop grew into $1 million company, and we had 10 people, and we made it a worker-owned cooperative on the on this community theme of I didn't want to do something just myself, so I did it with a bunch of co-owners. I wasn't necessarily the boss. I was one of the owners, right? So it was this kind of pooling of a collective intelligence and intention that was really, really fascinating.
Huh.
But the business profitability definitely came really late. And so and there was pain associated with that, right? Of just trying to, living in San Francisco, which is, one of the most expensive cities in the world, and grinding it out in this tiny little labor kind of craftsman salary. So that experience of myself, and then kind of seeing across the movement of progressive organizations or enterprises, people that kind of realize the bigger problem statement, and are self-inspired to pursue a particular solution, or do it with a community or group of friends. And so I could see across that movement that I wasn't the only one that was missing some basic business skills. In fact, a lot of people were either missing it or even completely allergic to it, right? Like this attitude of like, hey, and this was my attitude as well. It's like, hey, we're doing this cool community thing, and we don't know about the budget or project management or defined roles or legal contracts or all the the hard business skills, and we're suffering because of it, right? There's turnover because you couldn't keep people, because you weren't paying consistent salaries and benefits, etc. So having finally kind of made it through that curve with this small business, just had this realization of like, hey, if we can share some of the skills and learnings that we've gone through, and we could shortcut this cycle for even some people, that would be a worthwhile use of my energy. And then also seeing in long term of like, probably wasn't going to be a career woodworker of just making furniture with my hands for my entire working life. And also seeing again what pay is available for that type of craftsmanship is actually really low. There's this weird thing where in the trades, people want to go into woodwork because it's kind of a refined craft, but the pay is less and less for that, because you can get people working out of inspiration. So it's actually really low wages. So so that was the kind of the idea for Lift Economy. It was to take some of these different ways of doing business that are in alignment with a vision for a simpler economy, an economy that works for all life, and then offering them out. So I left the woodworking cooperative in 2010 and started coaching and consulting with other small businesses. And now it's been 13 years, and I have a team. We have a team at Lift Economy. We're about 8 people now. Still mostly Bay Area, but decentralized team.
Yeah.
Even in 2010, we started, there was, video conferencing and such. So even if I was in San Francisco, if I had to go to Oakland, that would take, all day or half the day or whatever. So we were doing, video conference meetings and all that stuff back then.
Yeah.
And so it's been great. We've 13 years, we've worked with probably like 300 or so small teams. And this actually ties into like the physics, like looking for patterns and trying to understand like the smallest elements and how they stack up and make bigger things. And so what we've done with our consulting is looking for the pattern of what are the business problems that any small organization has to solve, and that as like a complete checklist. And so that became our consulting methodology. And now we've evolved. Now we teach that. We have the Next Economy MBA, which is a webinar and a book that we've published, where we're actually teaching that out instead of just one-to-one consulting. We're teaching it, one-to-many. We have over 500 people through that program. So that's kind of the the arc of starting and kind of evolving into where I am now.
Yeah. Wow, what a beautiful journey. You know, it's amazing how we go through life experiences and either we pursue the life lessons or the life lessons kind of force us to mature.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at the arc of my practice, I started my practice in 2003 in New York City, just as, a private service of healing and consulting with people. And I had like zero overhead. I actually had to network with healing centers. And the first place I worked out of, she's like, oh, just come in and work on my clients, and we'll do a percentage split. I'll take 30% and you get 70% based off what you charge them. And so I didn't have to like pay a rental fee. I got to run events. She had a community. Like I just got to step into this experience. And then she's like, so she wanted to fold me into her practice and like have me sign an agreement that I wouldn't work anywhere else or with anybody else. And it's like, that doesn't feel right. And I left. And then I started to have to face that journey of stepping into more overhead. And I always wanted to keep things simple and light. And eventually I ended up partnering with two people, one of them being Sarah, my wife, and another being Tara Greenway, my ex-business partner for Theta Healing NYC. And we launched our brick and mortar healing center and hired our first employee. And I can actually see the growth of maturity of our business by the cycling of employees that we had, of who they were, what their quality was, and like to where it is now. And that journey, it's like it's hard to really learn those skills, honestly. It can be such a challenge to realize like the financial model, the roles, the expectations, the agreements, as you referenced before. And like some of that is so needed. And then at the same time, it feels like there's this new era that's kind of emerging of people both being in micro economies and then also this huge global network. Like I outsource things to somebody that, edits my videos that's halfway around the world and have no real relationship with them. They're just an independent contractor. It's like, oh, instead of having employees, it's just all these independent contractors and everybody's picking up 10 hours from this client, 10 hours from that client, instead of this, like, I'm going to work full time with one person concept. Like what's your take on that? What's your feeling about kind of this hybrid from these large, huge corporates to the smaller groups, and like how to manage what outsourcing is versus really honoring our employees?
Sure. Well, I see it kind of both ways. There's some beautiful things that come with technological advancement, and then there's also some kind of let's see, proliferation of exploitation and further concentration of wealth, right, on the kind of the shadow side. So but on the freedom side, it's like, great, you have this ability to do things that you didn't before. Like, for example, when I was first running my woodworking cooperative, I had to do all of the payroll and all that stuff just like myself. or I wasn't doing it properly, or, I wasn't doing my compliance and tax forms. And now you can just buy like a subscription to something that like does it for very cheap. Right.
Yeah.
Whereas I used to have to like, pay a admin assistant or somebody to do that. And it was, quite expensive. So there's some efficiencies there. And then there's some like you were, I think, alluding to of like some disconnection, right? It's a lack of contact and lack of relationship. And so yeah, in a way of being conscious of and like how do we run business in a way that nourishes life, which includes human relationships and fulfillment, and also our interaction and effect on our ecologies.
Yeah.
We want to we need connection and reciprocity, and to be appreciated and seen, etc. So that's one of the I think the forces of modern capitalism that we need to kind of I don't know, offset or just be aware of this idea of like, hey, if I give you a certain amount of money for a certain product, we're even, right?
Yeah.
It's neutral. I don't know you nothing. You don't know me anything. And in fact, now with the internet stuff, we could not even meet each other or even know each other at all, right? Whereas if we cast back into traditionally as humans, we're only alive as a species because we existed in small interdependent groups where you would know everybody and be in very deep relationships. So this idea of currency changing the way we interact, I think is important to understand and to design against. So if we're having, if the trend is towards less interaction, less dependency, well, we need to build in that interaction and dependency somehow.
Yeah.
So so that's our focus on not just cooperatives, but like democracy inside a business. So worker co-op or consumer co-op, or the different cooperatives, it's like a it's a formal legal structure where there's the collective democratic decision making and governance is built in legally, but you can do that in any team, and it doesn't have to be that legal structure. And that's kind of the trend we see is small businesses, even if it's a sole proprietor with employees and stuff, they're highly affiliative, right? They really care about their team, and they circle everybody up and ask them and consult with them, as opposed to just top down, do what you're told, which is more of a an older pattern. So these are some of the things to be aware of and try to build in, because again, if we want resiliency, we want to be around for a long time, we need that kind of connected group of people that is collaborating to meet our needs together. So so just raising that awareness of how do we build relationships, and the importance and the value of relationships, and not just reducing it to a financial exchange.
Yeah. I feel like both in the way of each individual business, but then also a larger sense of community, like I do my work. I work with people around the world online, and then I spend my money locally, and like I do my best to go to local shops rather than corporate ones. And I am a garden hobbyist, like I love my garden, but obviously it's not going to provide me year round. And so I go to places, and the other day I went to a local farm to pick up some produce, and it's self-serve, right? It's at the farm.
Yeah.
You go in, it's honor system, you check yourself out. They do have a camera, even though it's honor system, but those are important things. And I looked at the price, and the price of the chicken legs was almost double what I pay at the local health food store.
Yeah.
And I'm questioning this, going, it's pasture raised. So what's making this expensive? They're not renting space. they're not paying an employee. I'm checking it out myself. Um, I mean, like, why is it so much more expensive? And it's kind of this place of like building relationships that can honor each other, and like, what is value versus what is currency is what it kind of has been bringing up. And it's been a big conversation in my mind of like, I want to be in the sense of local economy, but if I go to the farmer's market, I'm spending twice as much on a jar of honey versus the one at the local market that's still local honey. Like, I want to support things as a patron, but I'm not feeling honored in the relationship the same way how some employees don't feel honored within, the construct of the company. Like, what exactly do you feel, do you kind of see what I'm hitting on? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're naming is, what I would say is one of the huge problem statements of the, we call it the business as usual economy, or the kind of modern global economy, where things are way cheaper than they actually are. And they're sold cheaper because there's massive externalities, right? So if you're getting maybe I don't know enough about the supply chain, but I think Purdue or something is like a big chicken thing. It's like $1 billion industry, or I think there's something like 30 billion chickens, killed a year or something. So it's got this massive scale. And they're selling this stuff super cheap, way cheaper than it should be. But then there's massive environmental degradation that happens, not just on the farm, but in the watersheds, in the air, transportation, all this pollution, the pesticides, the health effects, right? None of that is in the low price in the store. So things really should be more expensive. But there's this precariousness, right? Of I think it's like 70% of the U.S. population doesn't have enough money, to make it through another month, or an unexpected, car repair, or this type of thing. So, so the consumer base, even if I really care, I can't afford to pay double for the local farm. Even though they should get paid more, because the other farmers are getting paid way less. And in fact, in this country, it's really strange arrangement where, the agricultural industry does not exist without migrant labor, right? And undocumented labor. It just flatly doesn't, it just wouldn't happen at all. So how's that? How's that a legitimate, how's that a legitimate setting? It's not. It's illegitimate, right? If you can't even run it with legal labor that's paid benefits. So it's this awkward spot, right? Where
it's kind of a paradox too, because there's that side where it's like you can't get free of buying the cheap things, but you also want to support and honor the sense of like small farms and things like that, but you can't afford it. So it's like, which one can adjust? Is it me having to be very strong and moral of going, well, then I'm just going to become a complete vegan? Or like, is it also the farmer that's the local farmer, maybe not having such a high rate and taking less money, like
one thing I've seen on that is and this is it's a local farm. I know that there's a little bit bigger than the tiny farm, but they do sell locally at basically wholesale cost. So if you go to their farm market, it is actually cheaper than what you would pay at the health food store. But then when they sell their stuff, down to New York City, et cetera, through distributors, then they're actually charging, top organic dollar. But they have that relative privilege. That's a family farm. That's, I think, maybe 4 or 5 generations, right? So they own the land. It's been a successful family farm for that long, and they're able to do that.
So they have the capability to do it. It doesn't harm them.
Yeah, they basically run the local market as a service, and it's probably just a blip in terms of the amount of volume of produce and dollars that come through it. It's something they do to connect with the community. I mean, the other thing that I see, and I'm sure you see it too, is just people have chickens in their backyards. That is more common. I have next door, we get our eggs, next door from our neighbors who have chickens. We have, multiple friends, that they have meat birds and egg birds, and so it's like, okay, it's too expensive to buy healthy, organic, free range stuff. We'll just do it ourselves. And this goes back to, again, our history as humanity is like, that's what we've been doing, is either nomadic and following the food or growing the food where we live, and having it being kind of embedded in our location and lifestyle. So
community co-op versus capitalism. Yeah,
and there's some beauty to that. Again, I'm like you, where I grow a little bit of food, and it's a hobby in the sense of I'm not supporting myself, but it's one of the richest parts of my life is harvesting from my property and having a meal where we've grown something and we have some relation to it, and it's certainly more delicious and fresher and more beautiful. And then we've even if it's just one little basket of tomatoes, we've opted out of that big cycle. It's not coming from Mexico, right, with pesticides and all the externalities on it. So it's kind of this awkward moment, right, where we do what we can, but then we still have to earn American dollars and to pay your rent or mortgage, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such an interesting time because we are so flooded with potentials. Like I was looking at my life going, sure, yeah, I look at my bank account and I could go and do a whole complaint rant, but wow, I'm living like a king. Like literally, like 100 years ago, I'm living like royalty. Like it's incredible. And we have so much that is just fantastic of growth of civilization. And then at the same time, with things becoming so easy, it also becomes this thing of like, well, what is the next step of growth? It's not to then erase it all and like go, oh, I'm going to return and live off the woods and like completely isolate myself as a bubble from society completely, like as much as there is this like real return to nature that I feel is happening in our civilization. I have a student that she's like, I'm learning to bake all the breads that I love because I don't like how they all come in plastic. And to reduce, I'm going to take on the project of creating for myself instead of outsourcing it to an industry. And like she's doing it for environmental reasons, and it's a big question of like convenience versus like moral, and I think this is something that I'm wanting to bring more into my work. So much of what I do is reprogramming the subconscious and wanting to empower people and help them tap into their intuition and like become more mystical. And yet when it comes down to it, like, how do we then anchor into lifestyle, right? Like, and be back in the sense of community? What is this sense of like not isolating away and coming back to community? So when you explore, because you work with the concept of co-ops, what does that concept really look like? How do co-ops come together in partnerships?
Sure. So there's kind of as many forms as co-ops as you can imagine. I like to call them each their own snowflake, because they're created by the members who create them for their own benefit, right? For their own mutual benefit. So you can have a worker-owned cooperative where the workers of a particular business are the owners and make the decisions. You can have a consumer-owned cooperative, which is much more, worker-owned cooperatives are much less common in this country. Consumer-owned cooperatives are more common. People, maybe would think of the grocery store consumer co-op, where you buy a share and you pay a little cheaper price. Maybe you work a little bit, maybe you don't. There's different models. There's also producer co-ops that maybe people don't think of as co-ops. For example, like Ocean Spray Cranberry or Sunkissed Citrus, Organic Valley Dairy. These are huge producer co-ops where the individual farms aren't cooperatives, but they market their produce together under that same brand for that collective benefit. And now one of the exciting things is in the last decade, there's now multi-stakeholder cooperatives where you'd have multiple forms of memberships. You could have worker owners, consumer owners, and producer owners in the same actual economic entity. So you're actually getting a democratic Congress within a for-profit business. So this idea of like United States as a democracy is pretty questionable because the government has been captured by economic interests. There's not really any controversy around that. And then as whatever your democratic duty as an American is, maybe once a year you go to vote. Most people don't. Even on a 4-year cycle, there's still something like a 55% turnout, right? So you have massive disenfranchisement of the electorate, which is supposed to be the whole point, right? So it's not really a democratic lifestyle. But if you work at a democratic entity, then you're practicing democracy, full time. And so my experience of doing that was seeing how deeply that changes people, because you don't just work at a co-op and then go home and be a tyrant. Right. You're building communication skills, you're building community skills, emotional intelligence, conflict transformation, all this stuff is you have to do. And so it actually builds more advanced, citizens that will come home and solve problems themselves and organize their neighbors and their community. So that's why I've kind of chosen it as like a major lever for this moment of like, how do we reimagine the economy in a way that actually nurtures our community, right? Because if we just go with the exploitation paradigm, it goes something like this: like, get a really good degree so you can get a really good job, but of course you're in debt from the degree. So then you get the job and you're paying down the debt, then you get a big house with a mortgage, and then that takes 30 years, right? 30 years to pay for your home. So that's your entire, right? So now you're basically committed to this whole career. So then you work your entire life so that at the end of it, you can retire and enjoy once you're too old, to do much about it. So it's like you step back and be like, wait a minute, why did I work so hard? So I think there's this opportunity, right? Like you're saying, the relative abundance. I agree. We live like kings and queens in the past. Look at our lives, the lifespan, right? The average lifespan is we're pushing up 80 years, whereas 100, 200 years ago it was 40 years. We would be grandfathers or dead by now. But now we have this long lifespan which we get to live into and enjoy our lives and our communities. So yes, I think this is a tremendous opportunity, and it's really hard because there's so much momentum to the exploitation economy and how it's supposed to be done, but it doesn't have to be that way. And there's lots of room for creativity, reimagination, and a big element of it is basically downshifting, right? Just like, hey, don't have such a huge house. Don't have such a huge, expensive lifestyle with like exotic vacations and stuff. And then you can maybe enjoy your morning in your garden and, slower pace, and more relationship, more fulfillment, more embodied, connection and interaction.
Which is such a big thing for not just mindset and health, but also intuition and relationships. Like, half of communication is listening. You know, like you have to slow down to listen. And it's such a huge key of downshifting. Like what is it? What does that look like for people? Instead of trying to always keep up lifestyle expectations, and once again, these prescribed lifestyles that we're constantly fed. So, I really appreciate that. Thank you. We are Mythic Life, free thinkers, deep feelers, courageous trailblazers. We own our myth with our vibes, how we think, feel, and act. We believe that love is a given, not something earned, that spiritual is sexy, kindness is cool, and earth is sacred, that everybody has superpowers, and life is too boring without magic. We walk our talk, and when life gets real, we heal. We choose our path and make it epic. And we've been joined here with my friend Shawn, exploring this concept of economic structure and money, and like some of these design elements of co-op and community. And I just really appreciate you coming on with us today. For all of our listeners, you can learn more about Lift Economy and some of the programs. If you have small companies or businesses, they have incredible services at lifteconomy.com. And check out more about Shawn and the work that they do, because really it is incredible. Every time I have a conversation with you, I learn so many new things, and I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah. Well, likewise. Thanks, Eric. It's always a pleasure, and I likewise really appreciate what you're doing to, uplift the human spirit and the potential of each person. And I see there's this powerful synergy, right, between opening that awareness and pathways, and how do we do the business and the economics of it. So I appreciate your work as well.
Well, it's so important. We're in this sense of community in life, and nothing's isolated, nothing's separate or alone. So like the more that we can free ourselves from the busyness of thoughts and come back to those reflections, like where are my moral standards, like what is my true need versus I'm just outsourcing looking for pleasure. It's such important questions. If you want to know more about my work, you can check me out at mythiclife.com. If you want to be a part of the conversation, we do have our wonderful Facebook group, the Mythic Life Experience, and on Instagram at the Mythic Life. We're also on TikTok now at Mythic Life, and Mythic Life on YouTube. And every month we do have our free healing circle. If you want to come and join and have a nice meditation, experience the theta wave, and receive a good healing, we have that every month. And if you are feeling overwhelmed and bombarded in your thoughts, so you feel a sense of anxiety or stress levels, or feeling those lows, we do have our free live events every couple of weeks. So check out what we have going on at mythiclife.com. And thanks again, Shawn. This is awesome. It's a real pleasure connecting with you here and learning more about your work and hearing more of your history. So have a wonderful day, everyone. I'll see you all soon.
Thanks. Bye.